All right, meeting is started, and I'm gonna go ahead and admit everybody.
Thank
Just
you.
take a second. All right, and we should be good to start.
Oh, great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jorge Gonzalez. I'm the Medical Psilocybin Program Manager. We have Ian Dunn, who's the Chair of our Advisory Board and also of this Patient Qualification and Safety Committee. So we'll start in just a moment. Just to remind you that this meeting is being recorded. So please remember to keep language appropriate as the recordings are made public on the Advisory Board website. And with that, our cameras are usually off because in the far regions and frontiers and rural areas of New Mexico, that using camera can uh, uh, the bandwidth is decreased, and so we do keep cameras off. Ian will have his camera on. And when you have an opportunity to speak, we'll have time for that. And I'll put those instructions into the chat. So with that, Ian, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I'll call this meeting of the Patient Qualification and Safety Committee to order. Just a reminder, committees operate in an advisory capacity to provide forum to people who may have perceived or real conflicts of interest. They support the board by providing expanded community input. I just wanted to welcome everyone. Today is not anything specific. Usually I come with a document. I wanted to allow open discussion on other patient safety areas. So for instance, we have um, adopted a lot of the qualification, what safety thresholds you need to meet to be a patient, but we haven't talked about other aspects of patient safety. Those can include informed consent, environmental safety, and other aspects. So I just wanted to hear from the committee about what, they thought we needed to work on next um, in regards to that. So I will turn to any hands if anyone would like to speak and introduce themselves.
All right, and to raise your hand on Teams, there is a icon with a hand that says "raise" under it in the top banner. Its exact location can depend sometimes from computer to computer and system to system, but if you find that raise icon with the hand, you are welcome to click on that, and then we will call on you in order. Oh, and yeah, and you can also introduce yourself in the chat or put any comments or questions in there as well.
Perfect. And we did get an introduction in the chat from James Brown, Farm D, veteran of New Mexico, 5 Degrees North Healing Foundation. Alrighty. With no other introductory comments, I had prepared some work on informed consent in the event that there was no specific comments from the committee. Jorge, if you wouldn't mind opening that document for me. So what happened was this informed consent basically was taken straight from what the Dosage Administration and Clinical Practice Committee had been working on. It actually technically falls under our jurisdiction to adopt the informed consent. So I just wanted to go ahead and review it here as well, just so we can make sure, we were all on the same page. So for psilocybin informed consent, before undergoing psilocybin-assisted therapy, informed consent must be obtained from both the facilitator and patient. Informed consent should be obtained through direct discussion and shall not solely be satisfied by written acknowledgement. The discussion shall include risks, benefits, uncertainties, altered states of consciousness, and impaired decision-making. The department shall create a standardized informed consent form, notifying the patient what psilocybin is, overview of psilocybin treatment, possible side/adverse effects associated with treatment, benefits of psilocybin use, and a statement acknowledging that the use of psilocybin has not been approved by the FDA to treat or cure any condition. Any other additions, comments, questions, concerns about informed consent, what we can add? Alrighty, then we'll move. Oh, James?
All right, and I have enabled your mic, James. You can unmute when ready.
Morning, Ian and everyone. On this one, Ian, do we have a section here? I'm not sure if you have it in the future that talks about, I'm just looking at other consents that are out there. And I'm saying receives participants' consent and decisions related to the safety plan, the physical touch, and the presence of any other individuals. Is that in this part, or is that somewhere else we're going to cover?
We can include it here if we want to just make the informed consent broader. I think that would be within our scope to do. Can you just enter really quickly into the chat what you said so I can copy it over?
Will do. I'll put it in real quick.
Perfect.
All right, looks like James dropped that in the chat.
Perfect. And then so supportive touch, absolutely. What were you like, what specifically, whether we should allow it, whether we should not, I believe in dosage we were working on saying like in emergency situations, where like you have to obtain vitals or do any of those things that we were going to allow it. So did you want to just kind of incorporate similar language or what was your thoughts on that?
Yeah, exactly, Ian. Something to that extent. We use a participant consent, for that supportive touch. And are your still thoughts around the shoulders, hands, and feet? Is that what your kind of thought was besides the emergency touch of you're going to prevent somebody from falling, you're going to have to catch them, or you might have to support them in a different way than just touching their shoulder if they're going to be at harm. So it's two different things. Are you thinking individual emergency supportive touch? We need something with that, as well as what's your thought on that? Just that general consent thoughts.
Yeah, so I would be okay with getting their consent for supportive touch. I think it can be especially useful with some of the emotionalness that can come from psychedelic therapy, and sometimes human contact can really bridge that internal sense of safety. So I do think that it can be allowed. So should discuss supportive touch generally. You said hands, shoulders, feet.
Yeah, feet.
Okay. So patient and facilitator should discuss supportive touch. Generally, hands, shoulders, and feet are appropriate.
All right, and I see Kate Hawk's hand up. And Kate, I've allowed your mic. You can unmute.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. This is Kate. I'm looking at this and it, looks fine, is general, but then, of course, it mentions the standardized informed consent form. And I'm wondering, it feels like the discussion of exactly what touch is approved and what isn't, I'm just wondering, has there been an in-depth discussion of that? Are we just looking at, well, here's what Colorado does and so it feels like the informed consent form would have more details, or maybe there's a further discussion. And I want to mention that here in Santa Fe, we're going to have a meeting of just a couple of really dinner salon meetings with one for therapists and one for facilitators. And so these kind of questions about touch are important. So, other states don't allow really body work or other things that could be helpful. So I just want to make sure we're considering all of these things carefully.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that's why I tried to word it very loosely with the supportive touch. So I definitely think they should discuss supportive touch. What is okay with each person is going to vary. So I said generally hands, shoulders, and feet are appropriate, but if your practice has a policy of saying, well, we typically do this, are you okay with that? That would be fine. We're just saying in general, care, these are kind of the like what we would see in Colorado and that kind of thing. If you did want to go further, I wouldn't restrict that, as long as there was patient and facilitator consent, is my opinion. But I would love to hear from the committee as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, looking down the line, what kind of questions would come up? I know we're doing the best to have clarity and not unnecessary limitations, but, to be clear. So that's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, and then Ann Metz said in the chat, or actually, let me read a couple of chats. Catherine Warnock said, "What if someone wants a hug? I feel this is too limiting." Um, And then Anne said, other states distinguish between safety and supportive touch. People must consent to safety touch, but supportive touch is optional. Yeah, absolutely. That's why we, at least in the dosage side, because they're doing kind of the preparation and clinical practice side, which would be the like safety planning and that kind of part of preparation. They said, if it's an emergency and we have to, um, um, like if it's an emergency, they have to get vitals. They're going to be allowed to obviously get the vitals and make sure that they're safe. This is just more so that supportive kind of if it helps them emotionally. And then we have a thing from Catherine Warnock saying maybe also specify that all touch is non-sexual. I did go ahead and add that. Eileen Brewer said, it's definitely a difficult topic. I know there's a bunch of emerging evidence that physical therapy during a psychedelic experience might be beneficial. And that's why I said the facilitator and the participant should discuss that. I think different facilitators are going to offer different skills. If one of them is trained in, physical therapy or is educated on it and wants to perform that as well, that should be offered to the patient, but it is ultimately the patient and facilitators collective consent on what is, done in that regard. And then Eileen added a couple more chats. I think getting rid of generally hands, feet, and hands, shoulders, and feet are appropriate. Might be wise. My quotes are in the wrong place. Sorry. No worries. It's a Monday. We all understand. Yeah, so We can get rid of that. The reason it's included is just because that's what they are doing in other states. If you guys want to, if that's overwhelming consensus to remove it, that would be fine with me. Does anyone else have thoughts on whether that provision, generally hands, shoulders, and feet are appropriate, should be removed? Participants, session. Okay. Should we allow that both ways? So like, if a participant or a facilitator may withdraw their consent to receiving supportive touch at any time, or should we just keep it as participants? Perfect. Alrighty. And then probably both from James Brown and then Eileen Brewer said, I agree, participant or facilitator. And yeah, that is what I went ahead and add. Patients and facilitators retain the right to withdraw their consent for supportive touch at any time during the session. Just patient, I think it's important for the patient to rely on. Okay, so we do have a little bit. I do see James's hand up, so I will go ahead and let him speak.
Ian and group, and I'm all up for more touch and understanding the difference between, allowing the participant. And again, I just want to emphasize that piece, Ian and everyone, that this is for the individual. Yes, there's other modalities and treatments that we can use, which I would love to see incorporated um, while you're doing your journey or experience or having your individual patient going through that experience. It can open up different things in the mind. It can really help that DMN zone, to really help that default mode network. Some of these other modalities help to tap into those resources, and we're just finding out exactly what things you can do: meditation, activities, painting, journalism, whatever that patient might just be sitting there meditating in their spiritual focus, while they're going through that. And that just opens up different things. And so touch is important. And so I just didn't want us to constrict so much on touch. I just want us to have something that's really informed on what touch is going to be and what touch is not going to be, and then go from there and maybe open up those modalities. But again, the focus is that individual's experience and treatment. So I just want to make sure we're focusing as much on, not the person doing stuff for them, because we're just going to be there for them to support them, but really what that individual needs to do themselves to heal. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I do think it is important for what we can do for the patient. The reason I wanted to include the right of facilitators to retain the right to withdrawal is um, there's a lot of instances of there can be instances of patients acting inappropriately. And I also want to make sure that our facilitators are safe. I do think that patients overwhelmingly are great. But just because there are those one-off instances, I think that they should retain their right to withdraw. So I completely agree. Did you want me to just strike this generally hands, feet, and shoulders are appropriate then to allow for those other modalities as evidence becomes more abundant?
What about use examples of or something like that to give them a basis of ideas? I don't know. Thoughts?
All right. So I said, for instance, hands, feet, and shoulders, hands, shoulders, and feet are generally appropriate. This acts more to say, like, these are some examples of what's generally appropriate. However, even within different cultural contexts, what is acceptable to a person in terms of physical touch are different. So that's going to give that room for what each facilitator and what each patient come to agreement on. But in terms, does anyone else think this informed consent needs any other additions or changes or really any comment you have on it? All right, then we will just go ahead and move to adoption of this informed consent for the Patient Qualification and Safety Committee. All those in favor, please raise your hand at this time. Hold. Okay.
See 3 hands up.
Or if you include the chair, all hands down, please. All right, and then if you are against, please raise your hand.
I see no hands.
With 4-0, this is adopted. There should also be in the drafts folder of the Patient Qualification and Safety Committee, there's an environmental safety document.
Is that in this month's, this current folder?
So go into committees, patient qualification and safety, and then drafts.
Okay. Environmental safety.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, time. And then? I have all the notes. I know, I'm gonna go. I just need to go.
Where are
drop
you
off-
going?
I just have to go drop off milk and then I have an 11 o'clock.
All right, so let's begin discussion on emergency preparation. So I've also posted at least the emergency preparation part in the chat. This is just to ensure that all facilities are, adequate for psilocybin therapy. It basically states that each treatment area shall have a minimum of 2 accessible exits. Exits shall be clearly marked and unobstructed. Facilities shall not use locked barriers that prevent rapid exit except where clinically justified and compliant with applicable law. Facilities shall maintain reliable means of communication to activate emergency medical services at all times. All facilities shall maintain a written emergency response plan appropriate to the level of services provided and patient risk. The plan must include procedures for medical and behavioral emergencies, clearly define staff roles, and timely activation of emergency medical services. Facilities that are not reasonably accessible to emergency services or that provide services to higher risk patients shall maintain enhanced emergency response capabilities commensurate with the level of risk. Where permitted under state law and overseen by a licensed provider with prescriptive authority, this may include the availability of emergency medications and appropriate monitoring equipment. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns on that emergency preparation? Anne?
I just am thinking about people who work in therapy offices that maybe don't have two exits. You know, some of us work in old buildings. So that would be my one concern. You know, I wonder if there's just a way to, yeah, I can understand why that would be sort of a good general rule, but I think kind of in practice, when people work in old adobe buildings that have no closets and have one door, that is a limitation that maybe isn't necessary.
All right. And then Catherine Warnock in the chat also said she agreed. I don't have two exits in my building either. So I would be okay with, should we allow it to deference and say a reasonable number of accessible exits for the number of patients being served? Gregory?
Hey, good morning. Sorry I came in late. My name is Gregory Evans. In the propagation committee, this was kind of handled by building inspection and like the fire, like, so when you get your license, you're required to follow certain parameters for that license. One of those is building inspection for the permit to operate a business. And if we just divert it to the parameters of what your county or your specific area deems, whatever, you get what I'm saying. My brain.
Yeah, like
it's
fire occupancy and exit. Yeah.
And that way it's not our responsibility. It's written into like the code of, yeah, whatever.
Then I would actually, bringing up, that's a really good point. I would be actually good with just striking this and then letting the municipalities work it out. And you're not the only one with a Monday brain, Eileen. The number of I've said in this call is outrageous. But Raymond had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and reinforce that. One of the things that we're looking at is all of this stuff that pertains to occupancy and building codes and fire codes and all that are going to fall to the local municipal agency. That makes it the easiest because as long as they're in compliance with their local fire codes, we don't have to worry about that. As long as they have their certificate of occupancy, which means they're going to have to get their fire inspections done and things like that. So occupancy for municipalities is generally based on, you know, how many people are there, how many exits are available. Like some of them actually cover restroom facilities and things like that. So when it comes to the physical building parts of it, I believe our intent was to leave that to the, like I said, the local municipal government to regulate that. Now, in the event that there is no laws or statutes or things like that, I don't think it would be wrong of us to provide guidance, but I don't think this is anything that we're going to look at enforcing other than whether or not they possess that certificate.
Cool. Then the only thing we should maintain are emergency preparedness plans and communication.
Right. When it pertains to the patient and things like that, yes. But as far as the building codes, parking, you know, electrical, water, all that's gonna be up to them to make sure that they're in compliance with their local government.
Do most municipalities prevent locked barriers that prevent rapid exit?
I believe most do. If it's a business, we'd have to look into the details of that. I don't want to say that there is and then find out that there's one county that doesn't. But in most instances, if it's a business that's open, there has to be accessible fire exits.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and strike that. Let me know at the next meeting if that
Okay.
was wrong. So we'll just keep that facility shall maintain reliable means of communication to activate emergency medical services at all times. All facilities shall maintain a written emergency response plan appropriate to the level of services provided and patient risk. Plan must include procedures for medical and behavioral emergencies, clearly defined staff roles, and timely activation of emergency medical services. Facilities that are not reasonably accessible to emergency medical services or that provide services to higher risk patients shall maintain enhanced emergency response capabilities commensurate with the level of risk. Where permitted under state law and overseen by a licensed provider with prescriptive authority, this may include the availability of emergency medications and appropriate monitoring equipment.
And I see James has his hand up.
Yes, James.
Ian, in this, is there a section in here? I'm not sure yet. Is there a transportation plan been completed section, in that emergency preparation area? And then also thought was if are we going to open this up to the home? If these people are going to be doing end of life, are they going to be allowed to be doing this in their house? If so, some of the safety plans need to be a little less restrictive if we're thinking of somebody's house versus a business as well.
I don't want to
Thoughts?
interrupt you, but all end of life has its own like completely separate rules.
Great. Okay,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, so none of this is gonna apply. I deferred it to their committee because that's such a specific area and they have a lot more leeway than the rest of the program. So for now, I've deferred all of those decisions regarding end of life treatment to the end of life committee.
Thank you. And then so just do we need a transportation area in here somewhere? I'm not sure. Thank you.
Mhm. I will definitely keep it in mind. I think it's already gonna go with the dosage committee's preparation plan to have uh you have to have a ride home essentially. Um so I think we don't need it here, but I will definitely, if there is a spot later, then I will tuck it in there. All right, is everyone good with the emergency preparedness or preparation? Geez, it is a Monday. Cool. So this is the part that I have not thoroughly expanded on. 1 to 4 was taken, I believe, from Colorado's maximum, or maybe it was Oregon's. So it fully open to debate and discussion. The patient to provider ratio shall not exceed 1 to 4 across all clinical support tiers. Ratios may be further restricted based on individual patient needs, clinical judgment, and level of risk. High-risk patients may require additional staffing or clinical presence as appropriate to ensure patient safety. Patients shall be under continuous supervision by a facilitator during the active administration period. Patients shall not be left unattended, and staff shall maintain the ability to promptly observe or respond to patients at all times. So I definitely need some input on the patient to provider ratio. So let's go ahead and start there. Questions, comments, concerns, notes? Gregory?
I think setting a minimum for patient provider ratio, it seems better than setting a maximum. I think, again, I know it's going to be deferred to the specifics of the EOL community, but there could be many situations where the desired support team of an individual doesn't match the clinical 1 to 4 requirement. Like, I like to look at it like birth. If I have a doula, a mother, a mother-in-law, 2 other people, and a doctor. It's like we're way past that. And it should be allowable for a patient to define. Me personally, I don't really want anyone in the room, but but yeah, I just think that a ceiling seems strange, and if the only reason we have that is because we ripped it from a program, in existence, then I don't know. Maybe it could use some thought. I'll let the adults speak.
Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, the way it's written here sounds like it's maybe not what we really mean. We don't mean like one patient to 4 providers, right? We're looking at like one provider to 4 patients maximum. Is that right?
That is up. Yep. Yep, you are.
I'm awake on a Monday. Hey.
Oh, you beat us all. You beat us all.
Okay. Having said that, I do think it's a really important question about, are we going to require more than one provider per patient, for like, well, if they have to go to the bathroom or something, is somebody going to be left alone for 5 minutes? But then on the other side, it really increases the costs and accessibility. So I think that's a very important question about, how do we balance those things?
So, yes, to clarify what she picked up on, I had swapped it. So I had said 1 patient to 4 providers. What I meant was 1 like facilitator to 4 patients, assuming they were all, very low risk patients. They could be 1 to 4. But thank you so much for helping me correct that. Yeah. And then Catherine?
Yes, good morning. Couple things. The first thing, I already kind of posted it in the chat, that I actually think it's important to always have at least 2 providers, because if something happens to one of them, is it the patient's responsibility to call 911? If I think you need to have at least 2 people on site. Doesn't have to be, it could even just be an assistant or an admin person, but somebody needs to be present, not just one facilitator. And then I also think, so I have many clients who don't want to be attended at all times. In fact, it's I use call buttons, and I check on them depending on where you are in the process, anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. I have, and I'm allowing them to have agency to call me, because I want to be there when they need me, but I don't want to be interrupting their experience. I'm actually thinking about maybe even having live streaming in the room so that I can observe them at all times, but not have to like be on them. I mean, there's nothing weirder than, especially somebody who's struggling to lean in, knowing that somebody is sitting there staring at them. But I also have clients who want somebody holding their hand for the majority of the session. So I sort of allow the client to decide that based on where they are in their journey and what's happening for them. So I don't know if we need to like maybe specify, what does not be left unattended mean? So anyway, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Yeah, and just so for clarification, that language comes from how nurses are treated. It doesn't mean they're in the room with them 24/7. It just means like they have the ability to promptly observe and to respond to the patient at all times. So maybe let's change that wording. So left unattended. And then instead of that, we'll make it a parentheses. That way it's a definition. Patients should not be left unattended. Staff shall maintain the ability to promptly observe or respond to patients at all times. That way we don't have to be in the room with them. I don't think that is necessary. I don't think you need someone breathing down your neck to benefit from this, but I do think someone should be, callable, like you said, with that call button, or, some communication avenue away from needing help. I just don't want them to like, oh, they just got dosed and now I have to go on a lunch break. So I'm gonna leave really quick, but I'll be back. That was what I was trying to prevent. Not that I want them, eyes
Yes,
glued.
I heard about somebody taking their dog for a walk while a client was dosing, and I thought, oh, that's not okay. Yeah, so not leaving the premises, being within, like, I like the way you worded it, being able to respond at all times. That's what I think is key. So thank you. But I also still want to go back to I think we need at least two people at all times. I just don't think, like, I'm all about, resolving trauma, not like creating trauma. And I can only imagine if something like if the one provider there, something happens to them, is it the patient's responsibility when they're under the influence to, take care of the provider? Almost like maybe we need to say like there needs to be, yeah, there we go. Because I think 4-to-1 is still a good ratio when you've got multiple, but a minimum of two, if that makes sense. Because a 4-to-2 is really a 2-to-1, right? So yeah, so I think maybe a 4-to-1 ratio is fine. It's just, but a minimum of two.
Yeah, I think that would be great. Gregory?
I think it's interesting to kind of understand the difference between our system and Oregon's, but because fundamentally it doesn't appear that we are going to be imposing fines for violations. Like the actions are going to be pretty much like fix it or you're done or whatever. But so like that type of like infraction measurement and Monday isn't yet defined. But in Oregon, like for example, so I don't think Thomas is in here, but Intertech last year was fined $3,000 for somebody going to the bathroom. And I don't want to like diminish like the impact of like the event that's documented on the OHA website, but um yeah, it's like the thing about like somebody taking their dog for a walk, there's like context missing. Like, is that like a casual observer with a friend that like they were both very comfortable, but then it turned out that it wasn't that like safe. So like we're on the clinical protection side of things and we want to be really rigorous. Um, but if we're not going to be imposing fines, I think that ultimately gives us a little bit more leeway to define like what the minimums are and um, what the constraints are. But back to my comment in the chat, if we have a section for definitions, like if we can just define attended to, right? And if attended to means accessible via video that's been consented, can get into the room, like your nurse um, type understanding, I think it's worth defining those things rather than relying on um, an understanding of common knowledge, common industry knowledge, because this is going to go like I think the people participating in this may not be 100% aligned on vocabulary. But I think we're in the right space with this.
Yeah, so what would you like change? So what language would you prefer to use is my question.
No, I think it's good. I think it's just like add a glossary.
Okay. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I like definitions.
Yeah. We can definitely work more on definitions at the next one. I just don't want to have to write
Oh,
language off the fly.
for sure. Yeah, some of that is just kind of like throw that in the parking lot. But also like if we have like a janitor in the facility, the janitor can't really like fill in that gap of absence from provider. But like so I don't know. Like back to like who's in attendance or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you. James?
Ian, just thought on this with the language, because we keep bouncing around on different languages and stuff. Patient to provider ratios, really the provider's not the one. I mean, they could be a facilitator, but in this language, are we saying facilitator ratio? If so, we're saying patient to facilitator, and then the top would be patient to facilitator. I do like Catherine's thought of the 4-to-1 is a great place to start. We're using very challenging people, and then you got to think about groups, right? When you're in a group, a 4-to-1 makes a lot of sense. You start getting outside that group, and we start having problems about controlling if it's people who are challenging. So I like where we're going with the minimums of the 4-to-1. And again, I think that no less than 2 on this. We just want to be careful of the language. Is it 2 facilitators? Is it 1 facilitator and an assistant? What is the DOH thinking as far as other licensing? Let's say you have somebody that's a massage therapist and they want to be part, not necessarily a facilitator, but they want to be part of this. And so how do they get involved? So how do we include other people and not necessarily be that 4-to-1, but they can be present? And then the second thing too on that is administration. During the administration sessions, who is actually giving that medicine to the individuals? There's a lot of things that go on with that. Does the individual take it themselves? Where they're provided the medicine on in that ritual or that ceremonial time. So there's some kind of thought in there. Is the facilitator handing the patient the medicine? Is the patient being handed the medicine through somebody else? So that's why I'm just kind of curious on that piece on the ratios. We got to be careful about ratios when we put that in there. And so I just thought I like the 4-to-1 facilitator to patient. I really like that. Anything outside of that, we could say 2. I think there just needs to be another section there that says, there should be no less than 2, employees or whatever of one has to be a facilitator and one has to be something else present at all times during administration sessions. Just a thought on that.
She has already done you. Oh, all right.
Alrighty, and Gregory has his hand up.
I saw Raymond first, and then Gregory.
Oh, Raymond, I'm so sorry, I missed your hand.
Guys, so one of the things that we're all looking like we're on the right track here. We need to take into consideration the reaction from the patients. So when it comes to facilitator to patient ratio, some people are going to have gastro reactions, and it's a matter of fact. So while the facilitator is tending to that person's needs, that's going to leave the other 3 unattended. So we want to make sure that we do have the 2 facilitators just in case. And if you have a 4-to-1 ratio, if 2 of them have gastro issues, then you're going to have both your facilitators out. We're looking at worst case scenario. I want to look at both sides, the extremes of both. So I think at minimum, there needs to be the 2 facilitators, and they need to have equal qualifications because they need to understand exactly what's going on in the event that the other one has to go down the hallway with a patient to help them, alleviate whatever's going on. So they need to be equally qualified. An assistant would be great, but if they get in over their head because the facilitators, in the restroom helping someone, what's going to happen there? So I think the intent here is, yes, the ratio can be smaller. 4 to 6, I believe, was something we discussed. But there does need to be 2 present, and one could be the provider. The provider could be present because they're going to have the larger set of qualifications in the event that the facilitator has to be relieved for a short period of time. So we're on the right track. Just keep in mind that there are absolutely going to be times when the facilitator needs to be pulled from the group because of another patient's needs or something going on. Maybe they need to have a separate session with that person because they're reacting poorly, and we don't want to leave the other 3 unattended. We want to make sure that there's always somebody there with those patients so they don't harm themselves or others, or they have a bad reaction. So just some things to keep in mind.
Thank you, and I actually really appreciate that. So, um, I think it would probably be best to say then 4 to 2. That way we have a 1 to 2 ratio, which is already like a pretty solid, and then say, okay, if something goes wrong, then worst case scenario, it's a 1 to 4. Does everyone feel about that? And then Gregory was next.
I think it's for another meeting, but I did want to echo what I heard from James about who is authorized to handle medicine in that set of facilitators, providers, and assistants. But the point that I wanted to bring up that I think we may experience, like it may come up, so I think we should make ourselves aware. Oregon has a statute that explicitly states practicum students may not be left unattended with clients during an administration session. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but that being something that exists, it's definitely something that somebody could come back and argue about later. Um, I like these definitions, Jorge. Um, again, going back to the framework of doula practice, it's very common for there to be a midwife, an assistant midwife, like somebody who's in training that has certain level of, like, maybe they've gone so far in the program that they can handle certain aspects of the process, and then doulas being outside of the medical system, like oftentimes, and somebody who's like more trained in these like the legal parameters around this, but a midwife can definitely like defer to a doula to handle certain situations. And I don't know, I don't want to be whatever, but this isn't too far off from like that type of context, I think. Oh, having gastral issues during a session is maybe a less intense of a requirement to deal with than what happens during birth. Pardon my Monday.
No worries. Thank you. Jorge?
Great. Thank you for all the great comments. This is a great discussion as always. And I think James and Greg brought up some good points, and that's why I added the definitions of practitioner and guide. And these definitions are within the rules that are open for public comment that were created by the Propagation Committee. But these are definitions that refer to words that we'll be using in the rules. And so those rules, even though they're within, these definitions, even though they're within the propagation rules, they will cross over into other rules that other committees are committing. So these definitions are going to grow. So when you pull up those rules from the propagation committee, you will see those definitions. You may not see the words like, oh, it's not used in these rules, but it will eventually in all of the other rules. So if that makes sense. So with that, you have brought some great points up about the language that we use and what is a practitioner and what is a guide. And so the guide, what I hear is folks using as a facilitator, a guide who has completed some training, but is different from a practitioner. And as you can see, that's a licensed healthcare professional. So the practitioner oversees the guide. So we're talking about Medicaid and billing and the costs. That's how we reduce the costs, is that there are guides there, but the practitioner who may be readily available to oversee the guides and also administering the dosage of the medicine. So I hope that had some clarification with that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And then Gregory said, I would love to offer the ability to have a trusted friend or loved one attend. And then in the the Dosage Administration Clinical Practice Committee, they are working on guidelines to allow support people in the room as well. no less than 2 facilitators. If you just need an assistant who is there to make sure that nobody leaves out the window, they don't need special approval. I would love to offer the ability to have a trusted friend or a loved one attend. Um, and then Kate had a question or comment.
Yeah, I agree that there shouldn't be fewer than two support people, guides, facilitators for any group. And other than that, though, I think 4 to 1 is an okay ratio if you have, at least two guides, but you could have a group of 12 with 3 facilitators. I mean, in my experience, that's often been about the ratio, 4 to 1, and it works okay. But yeah, not fewer than two.
Perfect. So I went ahead and added no less than 2 providers on a premises or during group administration. Um, so are we
Well,
still maintaining the 4 to 1 then? Is everyone okay with that?
I mean, that's what I was thinking.
I hear no objections, so we'll just go ahead and keep it as that 4 to 1. Um, and then Catherine Warnock in the chat said, I think we should caution against having trusted friends or loved ones. In my experience, then this happens, the journey focus shifts from the intended issues to being all about their companion. I'm not saying we shouldn't allow this, but we need heavy education and caution around it. I agree. Definitely something that preparation will take up. But does anyone else have anything about patient to guide ratios or anything in this section? Cool. Oh, James?
Ian, just on that language right after the 4 to 1, it just says no less than 2 providers again. I just didn't make sure we're just using all the same language there. Is that what we're really meaning is 2 providers, or is that 2 facilitators or two? Thank you.
Thank you. Cool. And then really quickly, room design requirements. Treatment areas shall be designed to minimize risk of injury. No sharp edges, ligature risks. Furniture shall be stable and non-tip. Breakable items minimized. Adequate space shall be maintained to allow for patient movement and staff access at all times. And then in the chat, Catherine Warnock said adequate or hold on, minimal stairs to bathrooms. So restrooms should be easily accessible. Should we have a minimum on the number, like per patients?
And I think that's also something we'll have to look into as far as building codes for each municipality. There may be something in there that we don't are currently aware of.
Okay, again,
Yeah.
overstepping for codes. Perfect.
Thank you, man. I just want to address, Eileen had a question again. She asked it earlier and we missed it. But again, what if people want to do this outside? Just want to add that in there. Maybe we can circle back to that.
Yeah, so if people wanted to do this outside, then the room design elements would not apply. But the other parts like patient to guide ratios, as well as emergency preparedness, they should still have an ability to call 911, as well as a written emergency response plan. Even if they're outside, we can say, All right. So long as the environment does not propose a danger to the patients or guides. And reasonable measures are taken to prevent patients from there's got to be a better way to say running off. Le Okay, so none of the room design requirements should be construed to disallow psilocybin-assisted therapy in nature, so long as the environment does not propose a danger to the patients or guides, and reasonable measures are taken to prevent patients from leaving mid-session. I'm like, okay, final few things, environmental controls. Temperature shall be maintained within a comfortable and safe range. Adequate ventilation shall be maintained. Sound levels shall be controlled to minimize distress and external disruption. Same thing here, none of the environmental controls should be construed to disallow psilocybin assisted therapy in nature. Cool. Anyone have any questions, comments, concerns? The chat is making me laugh. I'm sorry. Environmental controls, temperature shall be maintained. All of you good with all of that stuff? Cool. And then safety equipment on site, facilities shall maintain at minimum blood pressure monitoring equipment, pulse oximeter, and basic first aid kit. Cool. Questions, comments, concerns over any part of the document? All right, and then we will go ahead and have a question with guides and other participants. Yeah. Hold on. There was a question about guides and other participants.
Yeah, let's see. First, looks like Ann Metz had a question actually for Jorge. When will DOH have proposed rules on allowed facilities? I know many of us are wondering what this will look like and what will be eligible space to work in. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And we're still working on it. We don't have a time on that yet, but we're also working with the training and education as well, as far as facilities and training. So we'll be working on those together. And the next training and education is coming up on April 15th. So we'll start working on that as well. The next question, there was another question right after that. Have a question about HIPAA compliance with guides and other participants. Was there a question on, what was the question?
It was, has there been a conversation about
Oh,
HIPAA compliance?
got it.
Not specifically. This would be a medical program, so it would be reasonable that it would apply. Similar to how HIPAA still applies to the medical cannabis program, so I don't see why ours would be any different. But not a specific discussion has taken place about HIPAA. Alrighty, and with that done, all those in favor of adopting the environmental safety that we have gone over today, please raise your hand.
See a total of 7 hands.
7, including the chair. All right, all those against, or please lower your hands at this time. Perfect, and then all those against, please raise your hands.
I see 0 at this time.
7 yes, 0 no. Alrighty, this has been adopted, and now we need to set up our next meeting date. So I can open my calendar. We could do the 20th, if that works for everyone. Any objections? Department, you okay with that?
Yeah, that should be good. 20th at 9 a.m.
That would be.
Yes, sir.
Cool. April 20th at 9 a.m.
That will be 420, if I'm correct.
Um, Alrighty, well, I will see you all. Happy 420 early. I hope you all had a great Easter. Thank you for showing up and spending your morning with us. I appreciate it. I call this meeting of the Patient Qualification and Safety Committee adjourned.